The reason for this meet being here is because I met Matthew and we started talking. I have this museum in Westfjords of Iceland. Westfjords is this here, and the museum is here. I'm called the remotest place in Europe, I usually call it. And it belongs to the state, and I'm trying to make a museum to more than just a museum. I'm trying to combine it to the academic world, and having courses, summer courses and workshops there too, with foreigners and teachers and professors from Iceland, and also there have been one from England, for example, 2009 from Sheffield University. Last year was the American University. But anyway, the reason we started talking, and I also think that the museum should be outside, not just a place somewhere where everybody comes to look, but it should also be part of the community. It's a part of doing something in the community and so on. So my work outside the museum is also try to somehow establish a link or some function for the museum in the community. So, and during the winter time, I'm living here, which is a village called Sigurðsson. But I come to that first, but later. But this is actually Iceland, and it's 103,000 square kilometers. It's comparable to, I never know this difference between Britain and England, but England is 130,000 kilometers, so it's 30,000 less than England. But in England is 54,786,300 people, but in this area here it's 337,610 people. So it's a huge difference in amount of people, but not so much in amount of geography. But there are 74 municipalities in the country, and 41 of them have less than 1,000 inhabitants, of which 6 of those municipalities have less than 100 inhabitants. They're talking about now to make it, they're talking about making the whole country to 9 municipalities, which comes from above down to the people, but I don't know how that will go. I have to first. I have to read it because from here, because my English is not my native language, and I think it would be better if I read it, so it would be more understandable. So I'm sorry. I know it's boring to listen to people reading, but let's see.
You can do like a little dance.
My talk here today will first be about collaboration between the Sigurðsson village district here and a committee with the villagers, and the Ísafjörður, which is here. So actually this is a place from here to here with the 1, 2, 3, 4 villages. This village here is one here and one there. They didn't want to part in this municipality, so they're still talking about, they are still being their own. Anyways, this was the first thing, about the villages and the Ísafjörður municipality government situated in the northern part of the Westfjords. Secondly, I'm going to talk about collaboration, or lack of it, between me and as a researcher and a group of people which I tried to study for the local branch of Red Cross in the same area. And in relation to that, I'm going to introduce a new research theory and methodology which I came across recently, which has been used in South America and US during the last 15 years or so. Thirdly, it doesn't matter, however, how many rules and regulations we will create in order to make a collaboration between two or more partners. We will always have to take into consideration feelings, hope, inspirations, passions, trust, as we were talking about before, experience, etc., in our social research analysis if they are going to mean anything to the people involved. Now, in this area, from here to here, there are this Ísafjörður, which is with 2,527 people, which is the biggest village. It's our town. It is another village just nearby, which is not on this map, called Hnífsdalur. It doesn't matter, with 203 people. Flateyri here has 204 people, and there are a lot of people coming there making films because it had an avalanche in '96 and has never recovered after that. So homes and things like they stand alone and so on, which is very tempting for people coming from I don't know where to make films about this. Now, Suðureyri is there, as I said, with 271 people, which makes the second largest village. And Þingeyri, here, where Matthew is situated in the summertime, has got 247 people.
248
Sorry?
248 in the summer.
Yeah. And then there is farmers and so on, their families, there are about 187. So altogether, in this municipality, this 5 villages, 5 or 6 villages, it's 3,639 people. After the local elections in the end of May in 2014, a new local government was formed. It was a coalition of 3 parties, a socialist, social democrats, and liberal party, who held the majority, while the minority consisted of 2 right-wing parties, where one is a conservative and the other a liberal one. The headquarters, what happened here? The headquarters of Ísafjörður municipality government is placed in Ísafjörður, of course, in here. Now, the new elected municipal government decided to establish 7 district committees. And that means in all these villages, 7 or 2, I thought there was 5 or 6, 7 villages. And these committees are supposed to act as mediators between the municipal government and the people in the villages. This is a new idea, actually, because we've been complaining always in the villages that the government in Ísafjörður have no idea what the people, what was that? What the people in the villages think or want or are wishing. They have no idea, although they are just 20 minutes driving between those. This was the idea of making a sort of district committee we should sort of mingle, come out with the ideas what the village thinks and give it to them, and vice versa. Now, if we start with the Suðureyri committee, now this is the better pictures of this villages and so on. Suðureyri here, Flateyri, Þingeyri, and Ísafjörður. And this is the Suðureyri, the village, and this is my house here. The main road is this road here. who goes through the village, and it is called the main road with capital M. Now, you cannot, until recently, you come from east here, and you to the village from the ring road, and you cannot go straight into the village because it's a one-way street. So you have to turn here and go this way out here if you want to go into the village and come back like that, you know, because it's a one-way street. I'm going to talk about, here is a children playground here. This is a ship where the children are playing, because I'm coming to that soon. Now the lorries who are coming, they have to take a turn here and out here. You can see the next picture. Here's the main road through the village, and they have to turn here to the right and then go this way. You see one of the lorry coming. It's not the big one, but it's the biggest one. They go out there. There are two fishing factories. One is in here behind these houses. The other one is at the end there. And the big trolleys, they have to go through this road because they cannot turn here and this way. The first general meeting where in the Suðuroy District Committee was established, was held in Suðuroy at the autumn 2014. 5 people and 2 substitutes were elected in the committee, and I was one of those 5 elected members. Suðuroy is a village of 271 inhabitants. The main employees in the village are 2 fish processing factories. One is situated on the western side, which is on the hill to the right side here, and the other on the eastern side, which is, the eastern side here, this is on the western side over there. Anyway, the village has a kindergarten with 24 pupils and a primary school with 47 pupils. 2 hotels, which are only open during the summertime, and one of them also has a restaurant. The only way to enter the village from the main road, as I was saying, is from the east to the right, to the this way here. And then you have to turn, as I was. Now, if one wants to drive through the village, I've been saying, you have to go this way and come back this, just like this car here is coming through here. It has, however, been impossible for the big trucks to do this with the fishing products from the factory on the western side because the streets are too narrow. Therefore, and against the law, the trucks were forced to drive back and forth on the main street to fetch their cargo. They had to go like that straight. They are bigger than this truck. Right? Now, anyway, during the years, this two-way truck driving has been silently approved by the authorities until a year ago, when the police suddenly decided that the trucks needed a police escort to drive through the village. Now, the escort was paid by the fish factory, and the factory made a complaint to the municipal government regarding the payment of this escort, and the government solved the problem by changing the street into a two-way street. But before they did that, they wanted the new elected Suðuroy District Committee to discuss this matter and to find out whether we could come up with some other solutions. Now, most of the committee members were fiercely against the decision of changing the main street to a two-way street. They thought it would be far too dangerous for the children living in the houses near the street. Instead, we suggested 3 other solutions, which I don't want to come into here, which is irrelevant at the moment. But after we had sent them the letter or our things, we didn't know that they had changed anything like that. It wasn't until a few days later we read in the local newspaper that the municipal government had decided to change the street to a two-way street. when a journalist asked the leader of the government whether the opinion of the Suðuroy District Committee did not matter, he answered that it is the elected municipal government that has the ruling power in the area and not the district committees. Talking about when in the film yesterday, I think it was you who saying that the closing of the mines were not so difficult, but the way they were doing it, you know, it's precisely this what you know. The decision of the government and the way it was made the members of the district committee very angry and created a relationship of mistrust between the members of the committee and the municipal government. It also created a mistrust between the villages and the district committee. Because of this dispute and other less dramatic incidents, the Suðuroy District Committee suggested a conference for the municipal government and all the 7 district committees next autumn, that was last autumn, to settle out disputes and to discuss how we can proceed in a more positive manner in the future. The conference, however, has been postponed twice, the second time due to the weather, which prevented the flight from Reykjavík to Ísafjörður with 2 of the main speakers. The plan is to have the conference in March, when the weather, we hope, have become better and flights between Reykjavík and Ísafjörður have become more stable. Now, after having described the rather unfortunate start of this collaboration between Suðuroy District and the municipal government, I will now take another example of collaboration, but this time it is between the committee and the inhabitants of Suðuroy, which is the other villages. As I mentioned before, the main purpose of the committee is to find out how the people in Suðuroy want to make their village a better place to live in. In order to find out the ideas of the villages, we decided to place a box of ideas in the local post office in which people could put their ideas anonymously. Now, after 3 months, only 2 letters were found in the box. However, many ideas for a better village were expressed in those 2 letters. And as a starting point, we chose 2 ideas. One of them was about recreating the old playground I was showing before for young children in the village, which is one of the oldest playgrounds in the country. The other idea was to recreate the surroundings of the primary school and in front of the church. I'll come with the playground. This is a playground. The playground has been neglected by the municipal authorities during the several years and isn't very appealing anymore for children or their parents to visit. The committee contacted an architectural firm which came up with some ideas for the playground and the school area after having talked to the members of the committee and the leaders of the women association in the village. These ideas were then introduced to the villages in general meeting and then posted on a wall in several places in the village where people could see them. And an election was held a week later where the villagers choose which idea they liked most. However, only 4 people beside the committee members participate in the election. So, it is obvious that the villages are not particularly keen on coming forward with their opinions about how we can make the village a better place in the future. And the Suðuroy District Committee is not particularly good at getting them to participate in new initiatives of the committee. Our collaboration with the villages are therefore not very successful yet. Now, having described Suðuroy District Committee, their action and the context of their actions, I have touched upon contextual or structural problems which hopefully can be changed little by little in the future. However, although we might be able to change these structures and relations into more equitable relation in the future, it will not automatically result in more participation of the villagers in this democratic project. It should also be necessary to establish a feeling or an atmosphere of interest, empathy, positivity, a will, hope, and trust among the villagers to influence and change the present situation towards their vision for the village. The question is, how do we establish this? Well, I did experience an incident among the members of the district committee that could point in direction of what we might be looking for to create these affects, as they are mentioned increasingly by academics in various disciplines. This is my water here. I mentioned before that one of the ideas from the box of ideas that the committee chose to start working with was to create the old playground in the village for young children. An architectural firm designed to do 2 ideas for the playground and sent them to committee for further discussion. Shortly after we had started our discussions at that meeting, one of us said that she wanted more grass in the playground than the architects had suggested in the drawings. Another member of the committee answered immediately, yes, but he didn't think it should be around the boat because it would soon be trodden down and changed into a mud hole. Soon there was a lively discussion going on in the group between all members of the committee, and gradually we reached a common conclusion where there should be grass and where there should be asphalt, stones, sand, etc., where things should be placed and where things should not be placed, and so on. All these suggestions were then written down and sent to the architects, who made the 3rd drawing for the playground, which included our new suggestions and was elected. With the result that the municipal government has a working plan for the playground to work with already next summer. What had happened during the particular meeting was that all the committee members had become very interested in the drawings, had felt an ownership of the playground and its drawings. They became enthusiastic about it, felt joy in discussing and creating new drawings together, and became interested and emphatic towards each other and each other's ideas, as well as for the whole creative work involving this process. Now the question is, how can we create such an emphatic, creative, positive, and interesting process with other things we will work with in the future? I hope that can be discussed further hereafter. Instead, I want to turn to the 3rd part of my speech, which is my research project initiated by the Red Cross in the northern part of Westfjords, where the idea was to find the most precarious people in the area. I had struggled because Matthew wanted me to talk about both of these projects, which I was telling him, and I had really struggled how I could put these together. But I think the collaborations is the central concept in this. Now, the Red Cross. On the official website of the Red Cross in Iceland is written that the Icelandic Red Cross has many different tasks domestically. The main emphasis is on bringing assistance where it is needed. New projects are chosen as a result of surveys and analysis. The society carries out surveys regularly on a national scale to find out which groups in Icelandic society are most vulnerable, with the aim of supporting them. Local branches of the Icelandic Red Cross also carry out surveys to gather information on circumstances in their local communities. The last 2 national surveys were made in 2010 and 2014, and there is another one planned for 2018. The problem with national service is that figures and descriptions from local places tend to disappear or fade away in the abstract result of the surveys. In 2012, I offered the 6 Red Cross branches in this area where I was in the northern part of Westfjords to do a similar survey in their area as the national survey of the Red Cross had done with the whole country. Only my research was a qualitative one, while the national research included mainly quantitative surveys to find out who were the most vulnerable people in the society and how Red Cross can improve their situation. The headquarters of the Icelandic Red Cross in Reykjavik wanted me to ask similar questions as they had asked in the national survey in 2010 in order to be able to compare my research with theirs. I was particularly asked to interview people in official institutions and non-governmental organizations who assist those who need various kinds of assistance because they are, according to the Red Cross, the ones who know best who needs assistance and what kind of assistance they need. In other words, I was not supposed to interview people who receive the official assistance because it would take too long time to find them, and therefore it would be much more expensive than interviewing the people in institutions and non-governmental organizations, who, as mentioned before, are the ones who know best the needs of the others. Now, I interviewed 30 people in 22 institutions and organizations where the focus was on finding out who, according to the interviewees, were the most vulnerable people in the society. All of them said that the people who needed most assistance were immigrants, people with various disabilities, and elderly people who live alone. This is very similar to the result of the national survey conducted by the headquarters of the Icelandic Red Cross in 2014, who asked 100 specialists in the social, health, and educational sector. However, on no account, and I repeat, on no account did this national research ask the people who receive the official assistance from the state and the municipalities. My research was not better because I did not either interview the people who receive the official assistance, mainly because I was told not to do so. This made me very frustrated during my research, and therefore I wanted to warn, and this is to the Icelandics, I don't know how it is here, but I want to warn the institutions and particularly non-governmental associations not to make such kind of research where only a part of the people involved is asked for opinion due to the lack of fundings. Because I have realized, I have seen some of the non-government organizations, well, how can you do this quickly, it's the most possible, you know, we don't have to ask them, they don't know it. We go straight to the... In doing so, I'm not criticizing the knowledge of doctors, nurses, and other service providers, nor I'm criticizing their sometimes ungrateful philanthropic work. However, any researchers should be obliged to talk to the people who are being researched to hear their opinion as well as the opinion of other relevant people, because it can have serious consequences not to talk to them. In the first place, it is unethical and shows a lack of respect for people who receive official assistance when they are not asked about their opinion of their assistance, while providers of the assistance are asked about it. Secondly, such a research gives very one-sided and probably wrong picture of the needs of those who receive the assistance. Thirdly, a very valuable knowledge is then lost when the receivers of the assistance are not asked. This knowledge can be quite different from the knowledge given by the providers of the assistance. Fourth, solutions to various problems of receivers of assistance which are only based on knowledge of the providers, is also very one-sided and can sometimes be simply wrong. And fifthly, by only asking service providers for their opinion of the other's needs, continues the hierarchical and sometimes prejudiced relations between service providers and the assistance receivers in the health sector. However, even though the receivers of the official assistance are asked much about the needs of it as the providers, both groups are still dependent on the researcher's opinion or his interpretation of the data he or she collects. Whether researchers choose to use quantitative or qualitative research methods, whether you choose to use qualitative or quantitative research methods, surveys, or interviews with structured, semi-structured, or open-ended questions, the hierarchical relationship between the researcher and the people he is researching is still existing, because he or she is doing research on them. Not only does he interpret the data he collects from other people, but he also writes it down in a report, which he then introduces to the public or the certain authorities, such as universities. If the people whom he is researching are allowed to say anything in the final report, or if they are considered at all, they often take a secondary role, included in an epilogue or a postscript. Allowing the people who are being researched to present their own interpretations on equal footing with those of the researchers is not, however, to create a better text that is designed to impact a deeper understanding of culture and meaning of their situation and society. It is partly about the irrelevance of many academically positioned interpretations to communities they are researching, and perhaps most importantly, it's about the power these interpretations have in defining the communities who are controlled and who has the last words. We were talking a lot about defining the communities in the, yesterday in the films and so on. Who has the power to define who they are and so on. But it is also truly about moral responsibility and ethic. One of the founding ethical principles in our liberal Western society is person's autonomy. To respect an autonomous person usually means to recognize that person's capacities and perspective, including his or her right to hold certain views, to make certain choices, and to take certain actions based on personal values and beliefs, and to determine his or her own destiny where he is not treated merely as means to the ends of others. However, this view has been heavily criticized by various researchers for being too individualistic. Instead, they emphasize the rights of communities to exercise control over how research is carried out, seeking to ensure that it is done in the community's interest. These researchers believe that carrying out research on people implies disrespect for their autonomy. So I quote Martin Hammersley from his book Ethics in Qualitative Research from 2012. What is required from this point of view for the principle of autonomy to be respected is that the people being researched become at least equal partners in the research process, that people have a right to participate on an equal footing with researchers in the pursuit of any research that relates to their lives, making decisions about what is to be investigated and how, what forms of analysis will be used, how the conclusions will be written up, how the findings will disseminate, and so on, unquote. Instead of research, then, on people, we have the research with people, and therefore the slogan, nothing about us without us. Autonomy is essentially about power and the politics of representation, about who has the right to represent whom and for what purposes, and about whose discourse will be privileged in the research text. Or, as Eric Lasseter writes in his book, Chicago Guide to Collaborative Ethnography from 2005, instead of reading over the shoulders of those who are being researched, the researchers have to start to talk about reading and writing along the researched through the framework of dialogue in order to escape or shift from the authoritative monologue to one that represents involved inter-subject exchange between the researcher and the informant. Quote ended. Social research is a collaborative in the sense that it would be impossible to carry out any research without engaging others in it. But collaboration we are talking about here is a collaboration which deliberately and explicitly emphasizes collaboration at every point in the research process, from project conceptualization to collecting data and interpretation of data, and especially through the writing process. Collaborative research invites commentary from our informants or consultants, whatever you want to call them, and seek to make that commentary overtly part of the research text as it develops. In turn, this negotiation is reintegrated back into the fieldwork process itself. What is particularly important here is that this research process yields texts that are co-conceived or co-written with local communities of collaborators and considers multiple audiences outside the confines of academic discourse, including local constituencies. These texts can and often do include multiple authors, although that is not exclusive. Collaborative research, then, is both a theoretical and a methodological approach for doing and writing a social research. Now, one of the main purposes of the Red Cross in any country is to protect and ensure respect for people's life and health, especially the most precarious and vulnerable ones. The Red Cross is particularly known for being the spokesperson for those groups of people and for assisting them in helping themselves. I think that the collaborative research that I have been describing here should be very interesting for the Red Cross. Participating in the research of equal footing with the researcher who becomes a kind of facilitator. The vulnerable group decides what they think is important to research in order to improve their situation and how they are going to do it. They might also at the same time use their own knowledge, gain a new one, and strengthen their autonomy and empowerment during the research process. Now, to conclude, I have now described a collaboration between a district committee in northern part of Westfjords in Iceland, its inhabitants and the municipal government. I have also described very shortly a collaboration between myself as a researcher for local Red Cross branch and people in institutions and non-governmental organizations in the area who have told me who they think are most vulnerable people in the Icelandic society today. However, there are some differences regarding the collaboration in these two examples. In the collaboration of the district committee, I am a participant in the project. That is, I am one of the research objects. At the same time, I alone interpret the data, write it up, and introduce it to you without a collaboration with the others. The only thing that I did was to ask their permission to write it, which they accepted. Therefore, this is a monologue and not the kind of collaboration I mentioned just before, because other participants in the project have not analyzed the data, written this speech together with me, nor are they here with me to tell you about it. We can call this a kind of participatory research, but collaboration with my colleagues in the committee is clearly missing here. In my research for the Red Cross, a collaboration between me and providers of official assistance in institutions and non-governmental organizations took place, but at the same time, there were a complete lack of collaboration between me and the receivers of the official assistance, as I have already described to you. On the one hand, I am therefore talking about a missing collaboration in those two types of research between a researcher and his fellow participants in a certain type of action or participatory research, and on the other hand, between a researcher and his research objects in a more traditional research. One way of overcoming this collaborative gap might be to do the research with the people who are being researched through the framework of dialogue and represent involved and inter-subject exchange, as I have described it above. However, an involvement and inter-subject dialogue is as saturated with conscious and unconscious power relations and positive and negative feelings, emotions, passions, intensity, and many other experiences as in any other powerless, wounded, angry, and as in any other research methods. We in the district committee became frustrated, powerless, wounded, angry, and felt that we were unjustly treated by the municipal government when it decided to change the main street in the village to a two-way street. The decision affected very much the relationship between the committee and the government, and does so still today. But we were also excited, content and joyful working with the drawings of the playground. Therefore, any social research, whether it is collaborative, participatory, or more traditional research, must also take this complex phenomena, which are called affects, into the research due to their strong influences on people's daily life. Thank you.
It raises a question. I mean, it's the only type of research I like doing now, is the genuine asking communities what's the important question and then working right the way through to presentation of the findings. Sometimes it can feel difficult when it's this kind of quasi-participatory research where the person paying the bill for the research is a local authority or a housing association, and you're trying to introduce these methods as much as you possibly can so that people are included. But for example, on gypsy traveller accommodation assessments, where people have been researched to death basically and they're sick of it, and they say, so are we going to get a new site at the end of it? And you feel ethically bound to say, in all likelihood, probably not, but please continue to work with us because it'll be better than not working with us at all. Siobhan and I were talking about this last night. It's a real difficulty, isn't it? Because they're investing their emotion and their time. This is not quick for the participants, is it? This is they have to trust you and invest their time. Yeah. And if you're not clear on whether the outcome is going to be of practical benefit, there may be some other benefits. Yeah. It's a challenge on some projects, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Now when I go to this meeting in Reykjavik, how are we going to do it? I mean, shall we collect them together and say, and get them from municipalities, say, can you promise that we get something out of it, which might get them interested to start? Was that a some kind of carrot somewhere place, I don't know.
It's so difficult. There's some sort of expectation management that needs to happen right from the start. That even that this is the worst case scenario, is that nothing happens, but you know that you have had a genuine opportunity, and we have some evidence, and you can use this in planning appeals, and you can build up the additional benefits. But the ultimate aim of, will you please accommodate us on a site, if that doesn't happen? I just think it's really important for researchers to say, this might not work. Please work with us, but it might not happen.
I totally agree. And this is not an easy way of doing it, but Well, the other way of going, you know, as we as anthropologists go alone out there, and then mainly because I got interested in this because I went to India and did my in South India. You know, I've never had nothing to them again. You know, nothing. And I got this guy coming to Sigurðsson, my place, in 2010, and he doesn't deliver anything to the people. You know, and it's totally wrong. I found and unethical. Totally. So we have to start doing something.
Yeah, just thank you, Valdimar. The case of the street struck me as very interesting because I think it sort of reveals a lot about power, and you know, the power,
Yeah.
and the faces of power.
Yeah.
Think about Stephen Luke's, and I wonder, you talked about the reform of local government and the proposal from the top down to merge the municipal districts into 9, is it nationally? That there will be 9 large districts now instead
That's
of...
what they're talking about now. You know,
And so that's one part of the process. Another part of the process is where decisions around public participation in planning and things like traffic management are no longer subject to some accountability through the democratic process, but become the responsibility of unelected officials. So that the decision to change the street, you said, was made by the next level, presumably by an official at that level, maybe on the basis of lobbying or on the basis of representations from a fairly powerful economic interest at the western end of the village.
Yeah.
So there might be an interesting sort of backstory to unpack in terms of the proposals around local government reform, the sort of dilution of democratic accountability, and the process of decision-making for critical issues like traffic and planning and so on.
Definitely, and this is my things exciting, I found, because it's more complex. About this, you know, this is one of the things we will bring up into our meeting with all the committees here. Because what are we going to do? I mean, are we in where we put houses or roads, things like that? Is it our job to do that? You know, and some of them say, no, we shouldn't do that. I mean, this is the municipality to do that. But where does it stop and where the other takes over? And
we've come through a local government reform system in Ireland, which has obliterated 800 years of local government structures. Now, admittedly, they weren't perfect, but many of those responsibilities have now been embedded in a bureaucratic structure where there's no input whatsoever from communities or from the population.
They've stolen people's identities.
They have, yeah.
You know, if you live in a town with a municipal authority for 800 years, it gave you a sense of identity, and then somebody comes along and just takes it away.
Yeah.
But interestingly, there was virtually no protest.
No.
Which again was interesting in relation to the playground. You know, you had a referendum around the playground and 4 people voted. And that's astonishing. You know, about something like the playground. It's a bit like your pothole yesterday. You'd imagine it was a pothole, you know, in the sense that this would be, you know, something that people could engage around, something very tangible, a playground in their local community. You know, I mean, it's different if you were saying we had a referendum on climate change or something. You say it's too big a problem, and we're not going to engage for the playground. Did you have any ideas why so few people?
No, but I suspect, I mean, there are a lot of people waiting to see if this will lead to something, you know. Will we get any influence of this, you know? And if they see that, then they will come along, which is quite understandable in many ways. But on the other hand, also the 2 of the big employees were against it. And they have a lot, particularly foreigners, you know, and that's missing in the committee here is foreigners. There's things like that, you know, needed to come into the committee steering. So there's a lot of things that has to, you know, and when this came along, you know, that they started just after we had started it, then they came with the power and said, and put it through. Then some of them said, yeah, well, we knew it all the time, you know, you would never have got any, you know, it's all kind of this kind of stuff we have to fight for. And one more interesting thing is just before I left here, it was the 10th of September, we suddenly got a letter saying that this area, which is a broken area, I mean, everybody is leaving and so on, so the government decides to put so and so many tons to this area, just actually giving money, you know, fishing, you can fish so many tons and so on, to keep the people staying there. But then they changed it between each villages and between each boats. And that depends on the experience, how much you get. And those who are fishing all year round, who have the biggest quotes, get the most of this, you know, while the ones who don't get the lot. So from the top down, there's a discrimination of everything you can imagine. And this is a very delicate matter. And I suddenly realized, we were 5 in this committee, 3 of them were directly connected to these employees, you know, and actually shouldn't talk about it. And we were only 2 who was not doing it. So this will also come into the discussions, you know, very much in the future.
It just struck me about the practical difficulties of implementing a kind of collaborative participatory research, particularly where the study population isn't a community as such, isn't say a geographical community. In your proposed research, where it was a population or a section of the population in greatest need. Okay, that could be a very dispersed population. It could be very atomized, anomic, alienated, fractured set of people. So the idea of addressing them as a community is there isn't a community as such. They're in the same category as it were, but that's maybe the only commonality. So generating a participatory, implementing a participatory model is particularly difficult with that kind of study population.
I'm very concerned about this, and we are only 3,600 in this municipality. I think we have to find 15, 20 people, because half of them will not bother to go. You know, if I can find 4 or 5 who come with me through this, you know, I would be very happy. But we are going to do it both here and in Reykjavik. So it's going to be somehow, I don't know.